Hey, thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Kyle Makarios. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Ford Task Force. And on behalf of all the members of the Ford Task Force, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We're really excited to have you learn about a little bit of the planning that's been happening in preparation for Ford going on the market later this year. And then most importantly, we want to hear from you about some of the key decisions and questions that we're posing right now, particularly on tonight's topic as it comes to parking, streets, and traffic as it relates to the development of the Ford site. I also want to invite you to continue to come to these meetings. We've been holding about one a month, public meetings on various topics related to the planning being done to prepare the site and prepare for Ford selling the site. Our next meeting is on Tuesday, June 23rd on stormwater and other infrastructure, and then on July 22nd we'll be talking about jobs and housing on the Ford site. Both of those meetings will be held right here at 7 o'clock, and we will have more meetings as we head into the fall, and particularly as we prepare to head into zoning the site. I also want to thank Gloria Day Lutheran Church, who's been so generous with the space and allowing us to use this. It's been working out really well for us, so we want to really appreciate them providing the space to us. And just a quick walkthrough about tonight's agenda. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes in this room hearing from Councilmember Tolbert and city staff about the thinking so far that has gone into the preparation for the site with regard to streets and traffic and parking, and really tee up some of the big decisions that we have to make collectively as we prepare to move into zoning, and some areas where we would really like public input as we prepare to kind of start making those decisions. So we're going to spend about 30 minutes in this room, and then we're going to break, and we've got two rooms set up with 8 or 10 tables each, and they're all both down that hallway, one on either side, one in room 100 and one in the gym, where we've broken out tables by topic. And we'll go through the topics in a little bit, and where we really encourage all of you to stop by and the rooms are identical, so you only have to go in one room, but there's two sets of the topic tables, and really take a look at each table and see what the key questions and areas for public input are at each table, and then we want you to weigh in so we can really try to get a gauge for what you all think are the priorities and the answers to some of those key questions. So with that, we'll jump into the meat of tonight's meeting. Please welcome Councilmember Chris Tolbert.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Kyle. I appreciate all the work that you've done on this. And you know, I was thinking we've had quite a few meetings here, and I know this is a pretty big crowd. Our task force has been involved with this for 7, almost 8 years, and the Ford Task Force has done just an incredible amount of work. Lots of meetings, lots of conversations, lots of debate, I know, amongst themselves. So before we get started, I think it'd be appropriate if maybe some of the, and they'll be working at the tables tonight, if some of the task force members who are here would stand up and maybe we can give them a round of applause and kind of recognize how much work they've been doing. I think a lot of them are sitting up here. If you guys want to stand up and let us recognize you at least a little bit. Kyle, and some in the back. They've been doing a lot of things, and some of it is more exciting than others, and everyone's kind of got their niche, but it's been impressive the amount of work and conversation that they've had for 7, 8 years, and we thank all that they've done. I'm pretty impressed that everyone's here today. I was thinking it's kind of we probably lost a few people planning this across from a golf course on the nicest day of the summer. A few people, if they had their golf bags in the back, they probably stopped by and said, well, I'll go to the second half. But thank you all for coming. I think it's a reflective of what an important component the traffic, parking, and street space is going to be on this development. As we know, this development is not an island amongst itself. This development is being built within a thriving community, a community that already has traffic, a community that already has a large population, and a community that's already here, and we want to make sure that it continues to be here and continues to be strong, and that any development that happens helps improve this neighborhood, not detract from it. And that's why this is an important conversation to have. This conversation, along with the conversation, the traffic study that PD will be doing later this year, is going to be important. And also another important component of this that we talked about at the last meeting, but as we go through traffic and we go through potential more people coming into our neighborhood, is the Riverview Corridor component of this. That's an important study that is going on right now, and it's a study that can result in us coming forward with multimodal transit in our neighborhood so that people can move in and out without more traffic congestion. I think that's something that we need to continue to look at more and more because it's a very important component of this. You know, traffic is here. Traffic's going to be an important part of this conversation, but if there's ways that we can move around traffic, it can make this site better and it can make this entire development better. And I think that's where we're trying to get. So thank you all for coming out. This is an important component, and I want to recognize Representative Dave Pinto here, back from the legislative session. If you want to stand, Dave. The crowd. It's great to have a representative who comes to all of our community meetings, and we're grateful for all the rolling up your sleeves and working with us. So with that being said, I think Merritt is next, but thank you all for coming out, and I look forward to continuing to work with you on this. Thank you.
All right, so for those of you that haven't been to these meetings before, this presentation part is the preview of what you'll see at the topic tables later this evening. So we just kind of want to touch on each of the subtopics, make sure you understand what it is, and then you are set to give us your input. So an appropriate quote today is from Bill Ford. Bill Ford's the great-grandson of Henry Ford. He works with Ford Motor Company, and he is also a strong environmentalist, and so he's spent a lot of years balancing those two worlds. And he speaks a lot about sort of the future of cars and traffic, and he has some interesting stuff. I just found a TED Talk today online for anybody that listens to those. So this quote from Bill Ford last fall, he says, "Any business only exists to make people's lives better. At a certain point, shoving more vehicles into urban environments doesn't do that." So that really sets the tone for the discussion on this site. So purpose of the topic meetings, as tonight's meeting, we share information, give some background, identify assumptions, choices, trade-offs, talk about expectations, and then we seek your input on kind of where we are in the process, and then we will use that input to refine priorities for the site as we prepare the zoning and public realm plan. So what informs the work tonight on this topic? There's a lot happening in transportation. Some of the trends that we've seen for years are starting to change more quickly. We have other new mixed-use developments to look to see how they've managed traffic and parking and these topics. We've had a lot of public input since 2007 around the Ford site and these topics specifically. We have city staff that has some expertise in this, and also the Minnesota Department of Transportation has specific design standards we work with. We also have a street design manual, a comp plan, and the early planning work. So all of these things come together to shape the direction we will be going. So we have three main transportation principles for the Ford site that shape this work, and we shared these at our last meeting on bicycles, pedestrians, and transit. The first principle for the site is that there will be an interconnected system of streets, bikeways, and walkways that is safe and accessible for people of various ages and abilities. 2, there will be a mix and density of activities to support transit through and around the site. And 3, urban design and site layout will be used to the extent possible to reduce auto trips and manage traffic impacts. And that's the focus of the meeting tonight. How can we do that? So some trends in transportation. I know you can't read this up here, and a number of the images we'll show you in the presentation are going to be hard to read in this room, but when you get to the topic tables, you'll be able to look at them up close and have more in-depth conversation about them. This shows sort of a cycle of automobile dependency, and there are a lot of factors that go into us becoming dependent on automobiles and staying dependent. And there are things we need to think about when we plan a site like Ford. Are we making choices that are increasing that dependency or continuing it, or are there things we can do that will help move trips to other forms of transportation? And you can't do that totally. You can only do it to a degree, but what degree can you, and what are those things to work on? So this is a quote. I know this is, it's kind of a challenging quote, but I think it's important for everybody to think about, and it's probably going to be the nexus of this project in the discussions. And this is a quote from the Chicago Metro Agency for Planning. And it says, "Residents who are opposed to new developments with increased density often cite fears of increased traffic and parking difficulties. Unfortunately, the reality is that low-density development patterns preclude transit options and force more people to drive." So this is it's a challenging statement, and it's one we all have to think about and talk about. Where's that balance between building something so dense that everything becomes completely gridlocked, or building things that are so spread out that you have no choice but to drive everywhere? Where's that balance for this site? Other trends and trade-offs. Between 2001 and 2009, average annual car miles that people are traveling has been declining in every age group. So in the US at this point, we've already hit the peak of sort of how much people drive, and it's starting to come down. And these stats will be at the table on background. And then high school seniors with driver's licenses. In 1996, 85% of high school seniors had their driver's license. In 2010, it was 73%, and it continues to drop. And I'm in that age group now, and a lot of my friends, their kids are not getting their licenses, and they're really having to push them to do that because they just have a changed attitude about driving. Not everybody, but more of them. All right, I am now going to turn over the rest of most of these slides to Mark Finken from Public Works Department, and he's going to walk you through some of these topics tonight. Mark.
Okay, thank you. It is great to see so many people here on such a beautiful night. And thank you, Merritt. I'm actually going to back up one, because I had one sort of personal observations that I have, and my personal beliefs in some of these trends and trade-offs. I think there's an awful lot of people in this room, and I relate to those people. I'm one of you, and it's the way I think and feel also. But as we grew up, we were defined by what we drove. In high school, you were defined by what car you had and when you got a car. And even yet today, many of us, are defined by what we drive in status symbol, and that's just the way we all were raised and grew up. And I think everyone in this room can kind of relate to that. But I also have 3 20-year-old sons, and things are different for them. It's not as important to them what they drive. It's more important to them what cell phone they have. That defines them much more today than what car they drive. They reach out on a global scale through the internet with a phone at a much younger age than any of us ever had an opportunity. So they just don't feel that need and desire to have a car the way that we do and did. Okay, so supply and demand. The assumptions here are that if you build a bigger road, more cars will come. We just can't seem to build big enough roads today. The bigger you make it, the more come. They always seem to find a way to fill it up. So the easier you make it, the more cars come. Everyone chooses that path of least resistance. And so the goal here for the Ford site is not to just accommodate cars. We do not want to encourage cars to come to this site. We just want to accommodate them and make them, we don't want to give them preference over other modes of transit, and over pedestrians or people on bikes. It's just, for many years, that's the way we work. That's just what we do. It's all about how you get cars from one place to another. But today, that's just not, it's just not the way to continue forward. So, I mean, people will follow the path of least resistance. I mean, every morning as I get up, one of the first things I do is I watch the news and I see what the traffic report is. I flip open my cell phone, pull up my application, and look and see what the traffic is doing today and choose my route based on that. And I may choose 2 or 3 different routes depending on what I see in the traffic each and every day. And whether or not it's snowing or whether or not it's raining, I may take a different route because it's easier. I would prefer to be moving rather than sitting still somewhere. And all of us are that way. So as we continue to build it, they'll just follow that path of least resistance. So travel demand management. Again, here's some of the assumptions are that a mixed-use site in Highland is well suited, to managing car trips, and the way that we can do that is through good mass transit and walking and biking and carpool and car share. I mean, car share, the little car-to-goes are fairly new here in the Twin Cities, but they're just beginning to take off, and the future for that is unlimited. I mean, it'll be really interesting in the future to see where that goes. The ability to just have a car to drive and not having to own it, not having to maintain it, not having to take care of it, not having all those expenses. A lot of people are beginning to embrace that. And if you can combine that with a good mass transit system, it really becomes effective. And then good parking management also. So the question here then that we really kind of want an answer for is, what do you think can help manage car trips within and through the Ford site area? And then when designing a place that includes cars, what's more important, driving convenience or neighborhood livability? And I think that's a good question, and I even add to it that, are those two things mutually exclusive, or can they cooperate with each other? So what we really need to try to do is find that balance point that Merritt was talking about between those two pieces, between the convenience and the livability. So that's a great place for everyone in this room to give us some input. We really need the community's input in that to find out where the community thinks that balance point is. So, okay, moving on. Traffic in Highland today. So at this table we have a number of maps with a lot of information on them. You can't really see it up here on the screen very well, but basically what we have here are it just gives you traffic counting information in a couple of different formats, and then we've identified some areas where we think some streets may be able to take a little additional traffic, and then we also have a bigger kind of general area that lays out kind of more of a regional system, again, some of the traffic counts. So please feel free to look at that data at that table, look at it on the website, and give us your feedback on it. Those are just the numbers and traffic counts that exists today. That's just good information that's out there. We wanted to share it with you and let you see it and give us your thoughts. So the assumptions then on traffic in Highland today. So average daily trips will increase with the Ford site development. I think it's no secret, we all know that. but how much it will increase is yet to be seen. And we've not run models to put good hard numbers on that. But some of the streets in Highland are more congested than others. I mean, Ford and Cleveland, everyone knows it's heavy volume. It's congested most of the day, especially now with the Highway 5 bridge down to 2 lanes. It's even worse. So, but Cretin is the volumes there are kind of medium, especially south toward the Ford site. There's a little bit of capacity there that still exists. And then Montreal is even lower volume yet, and it's also a collector road, and it has the capacity to carry some of the traffic out of this neighborhood, in and out of this neighborhood. So again, here the question is, what do you think are the most and least congested areas, and how might they be managed? We really want to hear about hear about this from you. I mean, we've got the numbers, but you all live here. You drive it every day. You walk it every day. So please tell us what's going on. That's a big part of the picture here. So then, alignment and connections. So as we continue to look at the Ford site itself, I mean, we keep seeing that Cretin and Montreal are the most logical connections into and out of the Ford site today. So this map kind of represents that. The blue represents city streets that are classified as collector roadways. The yellow shows county and state roadways that are collector and arterial roadways. And then the green shows what we would consider to be the collector roadways that would enter and exit the Ford site. So this is our take on it. It's what we see as staff. So so please let us know what you think. I mean, again, you all live here, so let us know, and please give us some good feedback on this. And I think one of the nice benefits of this is that fewer connections can concentrate traffic onto a few streets, but connecting them in a grid, as we're starting to show here, will give people more options. It may not necessarily force traffic into that Ford and Cleveland intersection. It'll just give people another way to get around and work their way around it. Moving on. So, going forward, PED and Public Works will hire a consultant this summer to do some traffic modeling. This modeling will be at a fairly high level, based on some of the zoning assumptions that we're starting to work with. So, and it'll give us an indication of, with this much density, this is what we think will happen. And again, these are based on assumptions, and you get as good information out as what you put into it. So as we move forward into the future, that master developer that comes in to develop the site by state law is required to do a full traffic impact study, and he will be doing that. So there will be more chances for input from the community as those traffic impact studies move forward. But what we're going to do is a higher level analysis that'll give us some guidance. When he comes in and the master developer comes in and does his work, that will be based on what they're actually going to build, and will give us some very good data at that time. So this is just the beginning of this process, so as we keep moving forward. But what we really want to hear from you is, what do you think in the neighborhood here do we need to evaluate in this traffic modeling study? So we're really hoping to get some good input there. And then, so as we've been looking at some of this, we've been coming up with some street types. So, street types that we intend to have the developer build inside the Ford site. and what might they look like. So, you know, we've really struggled with this a little bit, and we have to come up with a way to connect the Ford site to this neighborhood. You know, the streets have to be similar to the streets that are there today, you know, without, and still create some of these multimodal transportation options that we really want. You know, how do we incorporate bikes into all of these things? How do we, you know, create wider sidewalks? And how do we do it in as small a space as possible? So we really need it to fit into the neighborhood. So none of the road types that we have put together and proposed for the Ford site include more than one through traffic lane in each direction. So there's no 4-lane roadways and big wide highways through the Ford site. There's just no place for it, and it doesn't really connect to anything that makes any sense. So, so that first type is a collector street, a through traffic, and so we're looking at streets, you know, similar to what you see here. They could possibly, you know, have that central turn lane or possible green median in the center also, with the main thing being to accommodate those left turn movements, primarily at the intersections. And that if we really want to move traffic on these collector streets, there wouldn't be access other than at the intersections. So no mid-block driveways, no access points for businesses. Those would all have to happen on other streets and in the back. I think in pretty much all of these we've looked at where we have higher traffic volumes, we would prefer to have separated bike facilities as much as possible. And then we're trying to fit this into an 84-foot space with big wide sidewalks and trying to move cars. Now, a mixed-use corridor. You know, here we want to see businesses, possibly, you know, residential, and probably both of them together in the same building. And we've actually got a little bit wider right-of-way laid out for this. Again, it's 1 lane each direction. We're not looking at a center median here, but so now turning movements will slow traffic down. And then we may allow some access points, occasional driveways or driveways to alleys or large parking structures or whatever is there. Again, we want to try to do on-street parking in this situation. So again, if there's a lot of businesses along here, on-street parking becomes valuable to them. And then we also want to do separate bike lanes. Then residential corridors, kind of local streets, what we're all used to seeing. Pretty typical residential street that we would see in St. Paul. Getting it into a 56-foot right-of-way. Again, kind of 1 lane each direction. It could have a center turn lane or median in there. Again, that would probably take a little wider right-of-way than that, but it could have that. And then at this point, we'd be looking at no driveways. People would have access from the rear through the alleys or parking in the back. And then they would have on-street parking in some form. And then separate bike lanes. Maybe not a separate facility, but at least a separate painted facility is what we would be shooting for. And then a residential lane. Not a whole lot of this in St. Paul. There's a couple of examples up in Irvine Park and Maiden Lane, but it's a very narrow right-of-way. We just would design it as one shared lane. Garages and front doors could be right there near the street, and it would accommodate on-street parking. So this facility would just be everyone share the space. Whether you're walking, whether you're biking, whether you're in a car, you all get along and you all sort it out amongst each other. So then we get into some of the other things, roundabouts and some of the other forms. So I mean, roundabouts are very efficient at moving traffic in certain situations without a lot of, it eliminates the more dramatic 90-degree accidents. And so a lot of people are beginning to build these in the area, and they work out quite well. They move cars pretty efficiently. They don't always move pedestrians quite as well, but there's ways that you can deal with that. And then some of the other things that we're somewhat familiar with that we see occasionally in the city, angled or curved streets. There's better examples of that over in Minneapolis. Two-way streets, and two-way streets in particular with parking have a calming effect on traffic. I mean, you're just not zipping along when you're moving right alongside parked cars and when people are coming the other way. If you build one-way streets, people tend to drive a little faster on a one-way street than they actually do on a two-way street. And then things that we're very familiar with in this neighborhood, bump outs. They've been built all over this area. And then chicanes. There's a picture of one kind of there on the bottom. People aren't as familiar with that, but again, it's just a method to try to make people move out to the side and put a little curve in the road and slow them down. So the big question here, we've shown you some of our ideas, but what street design forms would be considered for the Ford site and why? What should we think of? And is there something that we've not thought of here that all of you know of or have an idea? We would love to hear it. And then I'll turn it back to Merritt to handle the parking piece.
Thank you, Mark. I just love parking, so wanted to do this part. Just a few, and everybody loves parking, you know. It's a very emotional, popular topic. So parking on the Ford site will be a big question as well. So we have a couple boards for you today. First, we need to think about the type of parking that we do and where is the parking located. So do you do parking in driveways and alleys? Are they private garages? Do you have parking ramps? Do you have big parking lots, small parking lots? So how do we deal with the parking management for the Ford site, and how does it relate to the surrounding area? The quantity of parking is also a good question. We can build a ton of parking, and then people will probably be excited because they'll have a place to park and they'll drive there and park, which means that it's easy to find parking. It also means it induces more traffic and eats up a lot of space on a use that isn't very productive. So a lot of places are going in the direction the city has as well, as providing less parking or having the market make more of the decision on how much parking to provide. So what should we do at this site? Central Corridor, for instance, which has the light rail line, now has no parking requirement. Now, obviously, that's very strong transit support, so that's an environment that can be appropriate for that. Would this be that type of environment? How much parking? How little? So we have questions kind of about the quantity. How do we approach parking at the Ford site as far as supply? And then who pays for parking? So there is a myth of sort of free parking, and parking isn't really free. A lot of us are used to in the Midwest going somewhere and parking and not paying for it. But really somebody is paying for it. So somebody has to pay to put the parking in. Should that be the city, the private developer, somebody else? And then somebody has to pay for it once it's there. So is the user getting to use it for free and somebody's continuing to pay taxes and the opportunity cost of using that land for parking? Or are users helping to pay the real cost of what it takes to provide that parking? So we have some questions about that. What do you think the approach should be at this site around who provides it and who pays for it? So after this meeting, stay connected. We have a Ford website where you can find a lot of information. We post videos of all these meetings. The input we receive at these meetings we post. We also have something called Open St. Paul, where we ask questions about different projects in the city. And just today, we posted 3 questions related to this topic. So if you have more things to say after the meeting, or you know people that couldn't be here, please encourage them to look for that Open St. Paul, sign up, and provide your input that way as well. So with that, I want to say thank you, and look forward to seeing you at the tables.
Well, primarily, we need to build for mass transit. You know the old phrase, build it and they will come. So we need to build for mass transit, good bus shelters with 4 walls, so you can stand out there all winter long, you know, through the winter and still stay out of the elements.
I live in the neighborhood and I like the format of this meeting. I like having the different tables and having the conversations that unfold. I like the creativity of all the different alternatives. I'm hoping we look at a lot of alternatives that keep the bicycle traffic flowing and keep the parking, like they said in the meeting, accommodated but not encouraged. I really, really strongly agree with that. We try to stay on our bikes and on foot as much as we can in this neighborhood.
I think that a connection, a direct connection between Montreal and Cretin is really important. Obviously, I'm also in favor of you know, bikeways and that sort of thing, parking. But I think the most important thing is to relieve some of the congestion that exists right now on Ford and Cleveland, and that's kind of why I came tonight.
It seems, though, that there has to be a way to move the traffic more smoothly, but especially cut the dependency on cars, make the places so attractive that we just don't want to be there with our cars. We just want to be there and walk around, and make it easy for people to leave their cars at home.
Well, I'm excited about the large picture and the large opportunity to kind of start from scratch in an urban area. That's just so unusual and so rare an opportunity. This is a way to rethink all of that and to say, how do we create a community where we're all close together, we're in community, and we're enjoying the same amenities, and we're all prospering together. So I'm excited about all the facets of the project.